Fighting Through Podcast, episode 124. Fire in the Sky, Fear on the Ground. Britain's darkest World War II newspaper headlines of 1940. Fighting Through Podcast, where the real history is. Through an inferno of bombs and shells, the BEF is crossing the channel from Dunkirk, history's strangest armada. Tens of thousands safely home already. London will fight street by street. Churchill says, "We seek no terms." 200 Nazi raiders are beaten. Offensive, not defensive, is Britain's policy, and army training is now concentrated on preparing to take the offensive, as the Navy and Air Force are doing already. 144 enemy raiders were brought down to midnight yesterday. This was Britain's answer to the end of the day of the greatest air attacks of the war, in which the German Blitz swept the length of Britain. When a German raider dropped a bomb down the funnel of a trawler in the channel, the skipper ran from the bridge, carried the bomb from the engine room to the deck. Hello again, and I wish you a warm welcome to a stop press party with the Fighting Through World War II podcast. I'm Bill Cheall, and the aim of this Second World War podcast is to share family stories, memoirs and interviews with veterans in all the countries and all the forces, and much more. I dare you to listen. You've just heard a few brief clips from the 1940s newspaper headlines, and if you found those interesting, carry on listening because there's lots more. I've got some rather sad news to share with you now. Cecily Howard, whom I interviewed last year on her childhood experiences during the war and more, has passed away on Friday 24th of October. She was such a lively character with a very mischievous sense of humour. She was 87 and the cause of death was a heart attack. Thankfully it was pretty quick and she hadn't been suffering from a long illness. So thank you, Cecily, for all you've done through your life, and thank you for letting me interview you and entertaining us all last year. R.I.P. Cecily. Years ago, as a young guy, I remember that, I was on holiday with a pal in Bournemouth on the south coast of England. It was all because Dad was stationed there during the war, and we used to take nearly all our family holidays there. My pal and I were wandering around the back streets on our way to the beach, and I heard the distinctive sound of one of those old Morris vans based on the Morris Minor 1000, but with a van shape at the back. I heard it in the distance coming over a hill, so I couldn't see it, but I said to my pal, "That's a Morris 1000 van coming over that hill." He looked up to see, and in about 10 seconds, sure enough, that very vehicle appeared over the brow. He was not a believer and said that I must have seen it coming, but of course I hadn't. He never did believe me, but that was one of those vehicles with such a distinctive sound that once you've heard it, you never forget it. The sound of the engine somehow reverberated in the van's cavity, which gave it the hollow signature boom as the driver changed gear. Does anyone else recognise the sound of a mode of transport without needing to see it? This brings me nicely to today's Spooky or What segment, because the guy in this story must have had Spooky as his middle name. In In the war, my great-granddad worked in a factory making tyres for the planes. He became so good at recognising a Spitfire from a Messerschmitt that he realised one day that it wasn't a Spitfire going over the factory. He yelled at his supervisor to sound the alarm to get all 4 factory buildings of workers to the bomb shelters, even though his supervisor didn't believe him. 2 minutes later, as they were all crowded underground, factory number 3 exploded. He'd saved them all because he knew what wasn't a Spitfire and refused an award because, as a man too old to go to war and an essential worker, he was just doing his duty. And that's from Middle English Maffler on Reddit. I think I may have mentioned a while back that I'd chanced upon a stack of World War II newspapers in my local antiques fair. They were piled high, very untidy, and looking kind of unloved. They were mixed in with a bunch of more contemporary stuff like Woman's Weekly and Radio Times. I probably spent a good half hour or more sifting through that pile, looking for interesting headlines. In fact, I was so taken with my find that I went back there a second time a few days later to clear the stock out. And I was fascinated with my collection. I started off reading through a few to try to find some references to the British Home Guard to support my upcoming episode on Andrew Chatterton's book Fortress Britain. But wow, did I get waylaid by other distractions. What those other distractions were, I'm going to share with you shortly, because they make an absolute perfect accompaniment to any work on the early days of the war. Obviously, the London Blitz and the Battle of Britain took place in 1940, but there was so much else happening during that time. So I'm just going to leaf through the papers and pick stories out. I'm not going to discuss every item because I want to keep the flow going and just let you soak up the atmosphere. So, to set the scene, Germany invaded Poland on 1st of September 1939, and Britain and France declared war on Germany just 2 days later, marking the start of the so-called phony war. There was little actual warfare occurring, but there were a few isolated Allied actions. The phony war ran from Germany's declaration of war in September 1939 to Dunkirk in May 1940. And although the Western Allies didn't conduct major military actions during the phony war, they did implement economic warfare, especially a naval blockade of Germany, and they shut down German so-called surface raiders, disguised military ships. Other Allied activities included an Anglo-French invasion of Norway to seize control of Germany's main source of iron ore, and imposing an embargo against the Soviet Union, which was Germany's primary oil supplier. On 7th of September 1939, the French invaded Germany's Saar district on Germany's west border with France, and that was meant to help Poland by pulling German troops from the far eastern Polish front, the opposite side of Germany. But the half-hearted operation fizzled out within days, and France withdrew. The next month, in October, the German Luftwaffe launched air raids on British ships, including the carrier HMS Courageous. There were minor bombing raids and reconnaissance flights on both sides. In November, the Soviets attacked Finland in the Winter War, but by the time France and Britain had got the necessary forces together to help, the war had ended, to neither side's advantage in March 1940. In April 1940, Germany was then worried about an Allied push into Scandinavia to the north of Germany, and so the Germans invaded Denmark and Norway. So Allied troops previously meant for Finland were redirected to Norway, and fighting there continued until June, when the Allies evacuated, leaving Norway to Germany. Wow, I can see where the game of Risk got its ideas from, if anyone's ever played it. Talk about ducking and diving around the board. On 10th of May 1940, Germany invaded France, Belgium, Luxembourg and the Netherlands. Winston Churchill became Prime Minister of the United Kingdom on the same day. And on 26th of May, the Dunkirk evacuation began. The phony war ended and the real war began. So, just to preface the kick-off here, back in November 1939, the Soviets attacked Finland in the Winter War. So here we are with the first newspaper I've got, which is dated January the 5th, 1940. And the headline is Finns Bomb Soviet Bases. 3 million leaflets dropped over Leningrad. British and Italian planes employed. Murmansk Railway cut at 5 points. And this is from our special correspondent in Helsinki. The 36th day of Finland's heroic defence of her soil against the Russian invader was characterised by an amazing list of Finnish successes. Confirmation was received that the Murmansk Railway has been rendered useless by the destruction of bridges and permanent way complexes at least 5 points. A squadron of warplanes yesterday dropped 3 million pamphlets over Leningrad and carried out bombing raids on the Soviet island bases at Ursel and Dago. An air attack was also made on Russian forces on the northern front near Linnamahari. So this is Daily Telegraph, January the 5th, 1970, and if you hear a bit of clicks and rustles, that's me playing with the real newspaper. I'm not reading this from a script. He rustles the paper furiously, just as if to support his statement. I'm just going to scan these headlines now. There's several on this first page. Goering made economic dictator. So it's a prelude to new taxation to combat the blockade. That's a blockade that the Allies have set on Germany. And Field Marshal Goering has assumed supreme control of Germany's war effort in the economic field. I hope he's better at economics than he is at flying. This step, it is officially announced, has been taken to ensure strong and unified leadership in the economic war. All the ministries and departments concerned with the economic side of the war will be represented by a General Council presided over by Goering. And his appointment is probably the prelude to a drastic new system of taxation, which, apart from bringing in large sums of money, will have the effect of destroying the wealthy classes in Germany and introducing a uniform standard of life. Gosh. Among the measures which are believed to be contemplated are a forced levy on all incomes above £400 a year and heavy taxes on all luxuries, even the smallest. German seamen arrested. This is from Montevideo on Thursday. This is Uruguay. 5 members of the crew of the Graf Spee, that's the old German battleship, were arrested in a motor launch belonging to the Scuttles battleship outside the harbour this morning while trying to escape to Buenos Aires. They were among those who were taken on the German tanker Tacoma shortly before the Graf Spee was scuttled. Last night they boarded the wrecked battleship, lowered the launch from her foredeck, and taking some personal effects, cleared off upriver, and the motor broke down a few miles outside the harbour. A naval patrol sloop discovered them this morning and brought them back to the harbour. The launch and the men are now under arrest. It's believed that the men were in the vicinity of the ship with some ulterior motive. Another little bit about Finland here. Arms for Finns from Britain. Discussions are proceeding between the Allied governments and neutral states interested in assisting Finland to defend her neutrality on the means whereby they can best reinforce Finnish defences. And a $25 million loan from the United States, £25 million. 400 aeroplanes. Washington, Thursday. Senator Pittman, chairman of the US Senate Foreign Relations Committee, stated today that bills authorising financial and other aid for Finland would be the first legislation to be taken up with the committee of the new season of Congress. Finland's all the rage at the moment. There's plenty of other stuff. He's an interesting one for Britain. Compulsory masks for car lamps. Motorists will be compelled from January the 22nd to use the officially approved headlamp mask or one giving the equivalent performance. It'll be illegal to use any other type of mask. The compulsory mask is that described in the Air Raid Precautions pamphlet on wartime lighting restrictions for road vehicles issued in October. So that's all part of the blackout. Cars had to have their headlamps masked off. German radio silence. German transmitters at Hamburg and Bremen, which broadcast an English news bulletin at 8:15 every night, were silent at that time last night. Doesn't go on to say what the reason was, but presumably the Germans had stopped it. I bet they allowed that traitor Lord Haw-Haw guy carry on with his teasing announcements. I think we're coming to the end of this paper now, yeah. So that's January. And we now come to Daily Express, Friday 31st of May 1940. This is during the period of Dunkirk, and by coincidence I got this one from eBay actually because of the date, because this is the day that my dad came back from Dunkirk. So let's see what the newspapers say about it. I'm going to start from the top because, oh God, the signs of the times. There's a little thing at the top of the newspaper which presumably appeared on every single edition. And it says, blackout, 0 hour tonight until 4:25 a.m. And it's telling us that the blackout is something like 9:30. Wow. It's an advert for Super Creamy, Super Cleansing, Creamex shampoo. I won't give you the full details, but that's just the flavour of what's going on here. Gracie goes to America with a red, white and blue rosette in her travelling coat. Gracie Fields and her husband Monty Banks left for America last night from a northwest port. They announced on Tuesday they were going. Then a few hours afterwards, Monty said, "I'm not going now." And only their closest friends knew they had changed their minds again. And Gracie refused to be photographed. Anybody know what the truth was behind that story? Gracie Fields was a famous English actress and a singer and a comedian, and she was a major star of music hall and cinema, especially in the 1930s. And she was once, apparently, the highest paid film star in the world. So her going over to America would have been quite a thing.
Of course, during World War II, she did entertain troops quite a lot.
Anyway, let's get to the nitty-gritty here. Friday 31st of May. Through an inferno of bombs and shells, the British Expeditionary Force is crossing the Channel from Dunkirk in history's strangest armada. And the main heading there is tens of thousands safely home already. My dad being amongst them. Many more coming by day and night. Ships of all sizes dare the German guns. Under the guns of the British fleet, under the wings of the Royal Air Force, a large proportion of the BAF who for 3 days had been fighting their way back to the Flanders coast have now been brought safely to England from Dunkirk. First to return were the wounded. An armada of ships, all sizes, all shapes, were used for crossing the Channel. The weather which helped Hitler's tanks to advance has since helped the British evacuation. Cost to the Navy of carrying out, in inferno of bombs and shells, one of the most magnificent operations in history, has been 3 destroyers, some auxiliary craft and a small steamer. Cost to the enemy of the fleet's intervention outside Dunkirk can be counted in the shattering of German advanced forces by naval guns and the survival of tens of thousands of British soldiers whom the Germans had hoped to capture or destroy. Wow, that's exciting times. Tired, dirty, hungry, they came back unbeatable. The army's coming back from Belgium, or France as well. It's a dirty, tired, hungry army, an army that has been shelled and bombed from 3 sides and had to stagger backward into the sea to survive. An army that has been betrayed but never defeated or dispirited. There was a touch of glory about these returning men as I saw them tramping along a pier, still in formation, still with their rifles. For this army still had a grin on their oily, bearded faces. They were exhausted. They'd not slept or eaten for days. Many tramped off in their stockinged feet. Others were in their shirt sleeves. Many had wounds. Many had torn uniforms and their tin hats blasted open like a metal cabbage. They saluted their officers, who stood with ragged mackintoshes and battered hats, and said, "Thank you, sir." Then they left to sleep. Here was Belgium's betrayal, but here was no defeat. They had not lost their battle. I'll just touch briefly on this alleged betrayal, which was by Belgium in 1940, because it's referring to the controversial decision by King Leopold to surrender the Belgian army to the German forces on, 3 days earlier, on May the 28th, without consulting the Belgian government in exile or the Allies. That action was publicly condemned as a betrayal by the French and the British. Here's a sign of the coming times. Signposts to be removed. Sir John Reith, Minister of Transport, announced last night that highways authorities had been instructed to remove signposts and direction indications which would be of value to the enemy in case of invasion. And the work was put in hand on Wednesday. Wow. 50,000 car radios to be removed. 50,000 radio sets now installed in motor cars in Great Britain will have to be dismantled soon and removed. A new emergency powers regulation issued by the Postmaster General yesterday says no person shall use or have in his possession or under his control any radio receiving apparatus installed in any road vehicle. and the carrying of portable radio sets in cars is also forbidden. Wow. Concentrated tablets of synthetic vitamins similar to those issued to German troops are being manufactured in Britain. This was disclosed yesterday by Professor Drummond, scientific advisor to the Ministry of Food. Hidden troops hunted in all British ports. In Parliament yesterday, Mr Cox Broxtowe asked whether all neutral vessels entering British ports were being searched for concealed troops. And the reply was yes, all neutral vessels entering or which have recently entered British ports are being subjected to thorough search. I think that's it for the front page. Let's have a look what else there is. I know there's something else because I read through this earlier. A little bit about men from Belgium. British Expeditionary Force wounded and Navy's ACAC gunners. Men from Belgium tell their own amazing story. Hospital trains moved through London from the coast all day yesterday and far into the night, bringing wounded BEF men back from Belgium. Those who could sit up waved to people from their carriage windows all along the line. Many of them had been brought in ordinary transports and warships. Coming over the channel in a warship, wounded men were bombed and gunned, yet those who could still use their hands and feet ran to help the Navy ACAC gunners shoot off the Nazi planes. And here are some of the stories they told when they landed. Driver Roy Davidge of Taunton carried a doll. Picked it up in a Belgian street after a toy shop had been bombed, he explained. Carried it with me to give to my young daughter. Abel Seaman Bradley of Sunderland. We went ashore to search for British troops. We found wounded men lying among the sand dunes. Some were carried into the whalers, while others came wading out up to their necks. Soon we had to carry on our work in a hail of bombs. And so it goes on. Here's an advert. Extra petrol ration. Not from the pump, but from a new set of Champion dependable spark plugs. Do you know, I used to fit Champion plugs to my cars in my early days of doing my own vehicle maintenance. I always used to buy Champion. Shelters must be up by June the 11th. If you have an Anderson shelter and have not yet erected it and covered it with earth, you must do so before June the 11th, or give a good reason in writing to your local authority. So that's nearly a couple of weeks. This order was announced last night by the Ministry of Home Security under a new defence regulation. If a householder is unable to erect the shelter himself, the local authority may help him. Blah, blah, blah. I haven't finished with this newspaper yet, but I'm on the rear page at the moment, and there's a little, obviously a regular item in the column which says last story in the paper, and this one is headed The Price of a Blitzkrieg. Stockholm, the largest cemetery in Norway, has just been laid out. It's announced today. The cemetery covers 240 acres and it's filled exclusively with German soldiers killed during the invasion. Here's one with a Canadian flavour. Montreal, Thursday. Mounties get their man. Troopers of Canada's famous Mounties today raided a cabin in the Laurentian Mountains and arrested Adrian Arcand, Führer of the Canadian Nazis, the National Unity Party. With Arcand in hiding since the party was proscribed as a subversive organisation was his treasurer, Noel Decari. Gosh. I keep saying gosh, sorry, but this is so interesting. These are the sorts of tidbits of news that slip through modern history coverage. Well, some of them are anyway. Gosh. This is a cartoon. This is one of a Nazi plane, well, like a Messerschmitt if you like, coming down guns blazing. And on the ground below him is a pram with a little teddy bear on the ground. And the caption is, well, we can always say we thought it was a tank. God, that is outrageous. I mean, but it's not unrealistic, is it? I'll put that one in the show notes as well. Oh my goodness, this one's talking about disgraceful news. Leopold, this is the Belgian king who's just stood down. When the terms of Leopold's order to the Belgian troops to lay down their arms were learned in Paris today, they aroused indignation. It was seen that Leopold intended that the entire equipment of the Belgian army, most of which was made in France, should fall into German hands. The terms are said to be, troops are forbidden to move from their positions at the time of capitulation. Troops are to line up on the roadside, leaving routes clear. They're forbidden to destroy any arms, munitions or supplies. Oh my goodness.
I think treacherous betrayal is the phrase I'm looking for.
This
is like a little advice column with the cartoon guy giving recommendations for safety, etc.
Mr. Sensible says, stay away from the windows. One of the things which Mr. Sensible will emphasise is, if there's any air activity near your home, stay away from the windows. This means stand or sit where you cannot see out of the window, then you are out of line of flying splinters. The importance of this advice has been underlined by the result of expert investigation into the crash of a German bomber at Clacton on April the 30th. It's been established that at least half, if not 3/4, of the 156 injured people were cut by flying glass. It's practically certain, say the experts, that if they'd obeyed orders to keep under cover and away from windows, few would have been hurt. I think we'll move on from this one. Just do this one. Pilot comes home by paddleboat. He downed 4 Nazi planes. A young man stepped ashore at Margate from a paddle steamer. It was the end of a day out. He was a young RAF pilot. Back at his airfield, he sat down to calmly write his report. Precisely, calmly, he described how he shot down 3 Nazi fighters and a dive bomber, and encountered 80 enemy planes on the way home. Leapt from his blazing plane, and how he delayed pulling the ripcord of his parachute because he was being fired at as he fell. And this is what he wrote. I was in a formation of 9 aircraft patrolling Dunkirk, and towards the end of our patrol we sighted about 9 Messerschmitt 109 fighters, and a dogfight ensued. A Messerschmitt started climbing away from me. I opened fire at 100 yards, and the second burst set him on fire. I then turned right and attacked another Messerschmitt, firing 1 burst from astern, his port wing folded up. As I levelled out, a Junkers 88 flew across my path. I did a quarter attack. His starboard engine emitted black smoke, and he half rolled into the sea. I was then hit underneath by a cannon shell. As I did a complete turn to the right, I saw a Messerschmitt 110 flying past. I did a beam attack on him. His starboard engine smoked, and he turned on his back and fell into the sea. I then turned to the right and saw a large number of enemy aircraft, so I turned sharply to the left and saw at least 80 enemy aircraft proceeding in the direction of Dover. A number of them immediately turned on me, so I headed for home, twisting and turning to avoid the attack. Whichever way I turned, I ran into fire. My Hurricane was hit a number of times. 2 shells smashed the instrument panel, and 3 more struck underneath. The engine stopped, and flames appeared over the wing roots. I was at 400 feet and tried to get out, but couldn't, so I pulled the stick back from a crouching position on the seat. As the Hurricane stalled, I got over the port side and took a header off the main plane. I was being fired at, so I delayed pulling the ripcord as long as possible above the sea. The parachute worked perfectly. My life jacket held me up well, with one deep breath in it. I was picked up by a paddle steamer and landed at Margate. Wow. And this newspaper's great. It's full of all sorts of stuff. And of course it would be, wouldn't it? I'm not going to go into this one in any detail, but the heading is simply, "They're out. Now what will Hitler do? London or Paris?" So that's really musing what the Germans' plans would be. Are they going to stick around Paris, or are they going to invade Britain and take over London? This is a couple of weeks later. This is the Daily Herald, Saturday, July the 13th. Of course, the Battle of Britain had just kicked off 5 days earlier on the 10th of July, 1940. 5 men in one plane are all decorated. This is about the RAF over Britain. The headline is 5 men in one plane are all decorated. 2 wounded, but raid went on. Every man of the crew of an RAF bomber was awarded a decoration last night. There were 5 of them. They'd flown their disabled plane with 1 wrecked engine and 2 injured men onto its objective in the Ruhr in Germany and completed their task before making for home and safety. Pilot Officer Andrew Dunn, the pilot Officer Charles James Drogo Montague, second pilot, and others will all receive the DFC. Sergeant Joseph Mitchell Dawson, observer, and others get the DFM. And here's the story of their exploit as told in the London Gazette. So they pinched this story from another newspaper. While on a night bombing attack last month, their machine was repeatedly hit by heavy anti-aircraft fire and then attacked by a Messerschmitt 109. The first attack disabled the intercommunication gear and wounded Sergeant Saville and Sergeant Dawson. The rear gunner, Pilot Officer Watt, was unable to warn Pilot Dunn, the captain of the fighter's second attack, but he delivered a good burst at short range and destroyed the enemy. 1 engine of the bomber was, however, disabled. Despite these difficulties, the target on the Ruhr was successfully bombed before the crew returned homeward. For 3.5 hours, the plane lost height, flying on 1 engine until the North Sea was crossed at only 100 feet. Good old North Sea. I bet that was cold. And so it goes on. So that's a nice little snippet of news about the bombing. And dawn-dusk curfew in 4 towns. Dawn to dusk curfew. A 45-mile strip of the Yorkshire coast between Scarborough and the Humber, that's Green Howard's neck of the woods, will be under a curfew from Monday night. An order issued yesterday by the North Eastern Regional Commissioner, Lord Harlech, applies the curfew to an area including the resorts of Bridlington, Filey, Hornsea and Withensea. So in this area no one will be allowed out of doors between 1 hour after sunset and 1 hour before sunrise, except in cases of necessity. Of course, the backdrop to all this was the continued Battle of Britain, with Britain defending herself against German aerial attacks. US call-up, 200,000 soon. America's territorial army, the 200,000-strong National Guard, may be called up soon for intensive training. President Roosevelt announced this at his press conference in Washington. Such a step would be unprecedented with the United States being at peace. General George Marshall, Chief of Staff, told the Senate Military Affairs Committee that the National Guard should be mobilised at once. So this is back in 1940. So America might not have been in the war at that point, but clearly they were trying to take certain steps to be ready. The Home Office is considering the possibility of a national curfew for children. The headlines, "Keep Children In," plan being considered. Oh, price of sausages is going up. Prices of chipolata and cocktail sausages may be increased by a penny a pound from Monday under an amendment to the order fixing the maximum prices of sausages. And over Germany, drones damaged. That's D-R-O-M for mother, E-S, not drones. Drones damaged, works fired. Airports were damaged and factories fired in devastating raids by RAF bombers on enemy territory on Thursday night. Over hundreds of miles from Boulogne to Bremen, from Amsterdam to Austria, our airmen left a trail of destruction. Rotterdam's principal airport at Valhaven was repeatedly bombed in a series of attacks which lasted for nearly 2 hours. Hits were made on many parts of the aerodrome and several fires were started. Other news, Nazis over here lose another 11, all bombers. 11 more of Hitler's warplanes, all of them bombers, were sent spinning to their doom during raids on Britain yesterday. 5 were destroyed during attacks on a convoy off the East Anglian coast. That's my neck of the woods. Another was brought down by Akat gunners of a southern town, who've already accounted for 4 Nazi planes. Yet another fell to the pilot of a reconnaissance plane, who, as he put it, was not content with a back seat. Bombs were dropped in Wales, the southwest, the southeast, and Scotland. All over the place, in other words. Nazis fail to sway the Turks. Von Ribbentrop was rebuked by the Turkish Premier Dr. Saddam yesterday. Dr. Saddam did not mention the Nazi foreign minister by name, but he did mention von Ribbentrop's intrigue to turn Russia against the Allies. He referred to the German publication of documents purporting to reveal an Anglo-French plot against Russia through Turkey. And there's a little stop press here. Japanese warships attack British. So this is January 1940. Japanese warships attack British. Moscow Radio, quoted by Associated Press New York, said last night that Japanese warships had fired on 2 British steamers off the coast of central China, killing 6 people and wounding 1. And the steamers were travelling in the direction of Fujian province. Here's an advert. Ask for Bulmer's cider, best with snacks. The top line of that ad was the ABC of health. Oh dear. 2.5 pounds of apples to every 5 glass flagon. This is an interesting little tidbit. It's, it looks like a cartoon column called What a War by Gilbert Wilkinson. And this particular character this time, it's Gertie Gestapo, the synthetic spy. And it's the cartoon as a guy, looks really filthy and dirty all over, unkempt clothes, carrying a sack of what looks like coal. So he's a coal man delivering coal to a house, and there's some spy-looking, shady-looking character in the background watching what he's doing. And the feedback is, "Mein Führer, the appalling conditions under which the armed forces live may be judged by the appearance of men on leave. They are black with grime and apart from a dirty kit bag have no equipment. Heil. GG. Gertie Gestapo." I'll try and put that picture in the show notes in case anybody's interested. And this is some bad news. No more cream buns or eclairs. The Ministry of Food, I didn't know we had a Ministry of Food, has ordered all bakers to stop making iced cakes, cream buns and eclairs after August the 5th. This step has been taken to conserve the stocks of sugar in the country. Gosh, after that date it will be an offence to place sugar coating on any cake, biscuit, bun, pastry, scone or bread. Talking about subversion and spying, here's another little sub-headline. Plan for American nations to foil German trade drive. President Roosevelt has circulated to individual congressmen plans to prevent German economic penetration of the Americas. Here's quite a poignant little article that has a sort of nod to the episode we had on Kisses on a Postcard about evacuated children. And the heading is "Wanted Town Children to See Countryside in Peace." Mr. E.M. Rich, London's education officer, had to retire on his 65th birthday yesterday with his greatest dream not quite fulfilled. He dreamt that every London schoolchild should travel out to the country one day every week to receive his or her lessons and to play games in the country air. I think that's probably it for that one. No, here's early signs of what's going on with Japan. Japan's aims said to be seizure of Borneo and Hong Kong. Japan's future policy in the Far East includes a programme for vigorous expansion at the expense of Britain, France and Holland, says the British United Press. The Japanese Navy, it is said, intends to take over the foreign concessions in China and then blockade Hong Kong as a preliminary to occupying it. Of course, before our war even started, Japan was at war with China, and I've got an episode coming up in the not too distant future on that very subject. God, there's a photograph here of a field full of sections of concrete piping. They're probably as tall as a person, and it's just a picture of all this pieces of piping in the field, and all it says is sections of concrete piping protect this field. So that's obviously to stop planes landing, enemy planes from landing. British ship escapes from deluge of bombs. A British steamer reached a southwest port yesterday after escaping from a terrible bombing attack in the Channel. 5 German bombers attacked her at noon on Thursday. Swooping on the ship, they dropped about 70 heavy bombs, but not a single direct hit was scored. Oh dear. Describing the attack, a member of the crew said, "We were travelling about 7 knots when the German bombers appeared just after noon. They came over very high and after circling the ship once or twice began to drop bombs. They were pretty wide of the mark, I should think they were, and the Germans decided to come down a bit. They then started dive bombing. The first came at us at terrific speed and let drive with a salvo of 3 bombs. They missed. The other 4 planes gave us a repeat performance. bombs burst all round us, and mountains of water were thrown up by the explosions. The Germans continued dropping their bombs 3 at a time, and we could see them like porpoises streaming through the air. We could hear the bombs screeching at us, and we were all wondering if the next was going to blow us to smithereens. Eventually, all 4 bombers flew off, but they left one to pester us. Our gunner gave him hell, but couldn't get a direct hit. That raider found things were getting too hot and scuttled away after the others. So this is middle of July 1940, don't forget. So it's all happening. Right, we'll move on, I think. Now, this is just a couple of days later in the Daily Express, Monday, July the 15th. We're beginning to come to terms with the fact that we might be invaded. The headline here is "London will fight street by street. Churchill says we seek no terms." Mr. Winston Churchill warned the nation in a broadcast last night that the war will be long and hard. He declared we must prepare for 1942, when the war will, I trust, take a different form from the defensive. The invasion, he said, might come tonight, next week, or never. But should the invader come, there will be no placid lying down of the people in submission before him, as we have seen, alas, in other countries. We shall defend every village, every town, and every city. The vast mass of London itself, fought street by street, could easily devour an entire hostile army, and we'd rather see London laid in ashes and ruins than that it should be tamely and abjectively enslaved. Wow. I'm going to continue with this article because it's good. I'm reading from the newspaper now. Here is his speech. During the last fortnight, the British Navy, in addition to blockading what is left of the German fleet and chasing the Italian fleet, has had imposed upon it the sad duty of putting effectually out of action for the duration of the war the capital ships of the French Navy. These, under the armistice terms signed by the French in the railway coach at Compiègne in France, would have been placed within the power of Nazi Germany. The transference of these ships to Hitler would have endangered the security of both Great Britain and the United States. We therefore had no choice but to act as we did, and to act forthwith. Our painful task is now completed. Although the unfinished battleship Jean Bart still rests in a Moroccan harbour, and there are a number of French warships at Toulon and in various French ports all over the world, these are not in a condition or of a character to derange our preponderance of naval power, so they aren't a threat. As long, therefore, as they make no attempt to return to ports controlled by Germany or Italy, we shall not molest them in any way. That melancholy stage in our relations with France has, so far as we're concerned, come to an end. So that was a sad time when the British bombed French ships in port to prevent the Germans getting their hands on them. I'm going to call an end to this part 1 of this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it so far, because I certainly have. But I'm going to call an end to this part 1, if you like, and I'll follow it up pretty soon, hot on the heels, with episode 2. And in the meantime, I recommend you take a break, have a coffee or a Calvados, maybe a cup of tea and crumpets, and I'll see you soon. I'm Bill Cheall saying bye-bye now.